call this meeting to order. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Broderick? Here. Mr. Feldmeyer?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mrs. G? Here. Mrs. Zeller?
Here. Will you all please join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no one signed up for recognition of the public, but we do have a number of presentations this evening. Welcome to all of you. Glad you're all here. First on my agenda is the middle school. Mr. Weber, do you need to set this up?
Yep, I think we have Emily David here, Beth Turner here, talking about middle school English language arts experts. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're
welcome. Should we stand right here?
Yeah.
Is that good?
That's great.
Beautiful. Hi, thanks for having us.
You're always welcome.
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Sorry, yeah, I just didn't know when they were.
Talking about the outcomes of our middle school language arts test adoption. And what we have decided to recommend for adoption is the Common Lit 360 curriculum and assessment series.
So just a basic overview of the program. We're really excited about it because it is a great program that will meet the needs of our 5 through 8 building, which is hard to find a resource that does that with our 2 different kind of grade bands going on there. We love that it's research-based and created by teachers, which means that we know it will be an engaging program for our students. There are a lot of different options for engaging the students in this curriculum. The full program itself includes a Common Lit 360, which is a thematic unit, set of units that have text sets and novels. In addition, there is a lesson content library, which includes over 3,000 lessons that can be differentiated and targeted for student intervention and extension opportunities. There are lots of digital tools for students and resources for professional development for teachers. So as we're learning about the program and beyond, that on-demand resource is going to be really helpful for us.
And this next slide just breaks down a little bit more of kind of the differences between the 2 areas that we'll be able to access. One is kind of a general library that you can sort through by genre, topic, grade level, standard. And then the other is called the 360 curriculum, and it's a set for each grade level of 6 full units. And each one includes vocab, reading, writing, discussion, and then other kinds of things. But what is really nice about this for us is that we can be flexible with it. We know that we have a wide range of students at every grade level. So we have the opportunity to stretch ourselves into the grade levels above us to access things for our students who are needing some enrichment. And we have opportunities to use other resources for reteaching and small group work and stuff like that. So the flexibility was really appealing to us as we try to find something to fit our building's unique needs.
The alignment to standards was very intriguing to us because we were looking for standards-based assessments that we could use throughout the school year as benchmark opportunities, and then also specific, like targeted standards-based lessons that we could use to kind of support our multi-tiered system of supports for students in Wyoming schools. So there are lesson planning resources for teachers as well, which include paired text and related media to build background knowledge with our 5th through 8th grade students. So we can use any of these tools to kind of track the learning of our students to support them in their growth as readers and writers, using those assessment tools that we'll talk about in a couple of slides.
There's also the connections to our future focused skills, or those 21st century learning skills. There's a lot of technology and critical thinking aspects of it. Every unit comes with a kind of function to practice discussions with your peers, which we know those speaking and listening skills are really important and can sometimes be overlooked when we're doing other things. So we love that every single unit brings us back to those kind of collaborative discussion skills.
So the assessment series is part of the full Common Lit program that is not accessed for free through their content library. And this program is fantastic because it includes 3 specific assessment series that we could use to benchmark student skills. And they are differentiated by standards. So you can see where your students as a whole and individually need to have those targeted interventions in reading and writing. There are the performance data that is available for teachers and administrators is really helpful in creating those target lessons and whole group lessons. In addition to that, the professional development on-demand program allows us to learn how to use this data more effectively. And kind of as we're learning the program, we can use this to kind of grow our kind of action research ability to add this data into our learning process and planning process. So the reading growth data monitors our student progress, and it also supports the planning and future curriculum with our students.
And then beyond just those kind of 3 benchmark assessments, we have the opportunity to access this data portal continuously. So every time students do an activity, it tracks their progress based on the standard. So it's kind of keeping you continually up to date on how students are progressing. And it's going to be really helpful for us in terms of differentiation, making small groups and figuring out where our students' strengths and weaknesses are.
The content library is a piece of Common Lit 360 that it supports the overall thematic units of the Common Lit 360. It's also a piece that can support us in our curriculum that is existing as it is. But you can search the content library by theme, by text set, by standard, or by target lessons, and even more than that, to find nonfiction and literary texts that support the learning of our students in our classrooms.
One of the things I really liked as we were doing this as a pilot, and that I hope to get a little bit more finesse with as we implement it, was the way that you can differentiate through the way that students access different things. So there are different strategies and different things you can turn on for different students to kind of check in with them or kind of let them fly on their own or to offer collaborative opportunities. So there's opportunities to work as a whole class and then partner and then independently, and it'll kind of have prompts and checks along the way. And then there's also this opportunity where there are these like in-text questions. So every once in a while when they read, they have to stop and answer a question before they can move on to the next part. And that's really helped us monitor progress kind of as they're working. And it all shows up in this like real-time dashboard. So you can see if a student answered something and you can see their misunderstanding, like right at that moment, you can go over to that student, kind of redirect them and then let them get back to it, which has been really, really nice. There's also text to speech, read aloud, and translation into lots of different languages.
This is one of my favorite parts of the program because with a program that's as comprehensive as this one, there are so many parts that we need to learn and master as teachers. And so having that on-demand support in addition to all of the webinars that are available to teachers is going to be really helpful for us. You can schedule live personalized webinars that are specific to questions that we have. And I'm just thinking specifically about the autonomy that we have as teachers in our classrooms and the number of times that we know what's best for our students. How can we use this resource to support them? Well, there are so many different pathways to do that with Common Lit. So I'm really excited about learning more about the program in addition to implementing it from what I know so far.
Additionally, we love to see this here. It imports and connects perfectly with Clever and Canvas. So we have that natural seamless integration into the systems that we already use. So that just kind of makes things a little bit more fluid for everybody.
Are there any questions about the program?
is so thorough. I feel like the differentiation, I love the flexibility. Like I wrote down so many things that I liked about it. I'm just curious, like how long it takes you to find this? Like, was it kind of, you've heard about other people using it? So I'm always just curious on how we.
That was kind of where we started. I'm really involved in the Ohio Writing Project. So I just reached out to the Ohio Writing Project listserv and I said, hey, we're, undergoing this resource adoption. And people just responded and said, this is what we use. This is what we use. And we also reached out to like school districts. And we got a really thorough kind of good dialogue going with Mary Mott to kind of like hear what they use and what they like. So that was kind of where we started. And then we had a whole bunch of stuff come in and some of it, we looked at and it didn't seem like the right fit. And Common Lit just had this level of flexibility that seemed amazing for us. A lot of things are only 6-8 because of the way the standards work. So finding something that we could implement for our 5-8 to have that alignment was really important to us.
And the exciting thing about that too is Common Lit said that they're going to be continually building new thematic units. So since it's a digital program that we can also transfer into print if we need to, it has lots of options for the future too, that students will be able to access.
So we'll continually get every upgrade or improvement or change that they make, which we're excited about.
Or you can ask the print. Yeah.
You're not gonna put one down.
I love all this, and I see all the benefits and I know you're a great teacher, you're gonna use it in the best way. But given that this is this digital format, I'm curious how you're incorporating your novels, your printed word into the classroom. There are some studies that show kids retain better,
Yes.
or people retain better.
And
in
we see
print.
too, and it might even be a 7th and 8th grade, 5th and 6th grade difference thing. We see, right at Jen, because she's here, that doing some of this stuff on paper has been really beneficial just for attention and for practicing our reading strategies. So everything has a print component that you can print out and copy and put into units or binders or however you want to do it. So it does have that component, and we haven't really had a textbook that we've used regularly for an extremely long time. So it's not that big of, it actually fits in kind of better with our current teaching style this way. And what's so nice about it is everything is so flexible that like, it's like a Google Doc and you download it, and you make a copy of it, and then you can modify it as you want. So we've been able to modify some of their things to incorporate both the text that they provide in a unit and connect it to a novel we're reading in class. So it's kind of cool how you can tweak things and integrate them because of how flexible it
So
is.
it's not like this is taking over all the things that you're
Yeah.
doing in the classroom with your novels and the other creative things that you do. It's a kind of a tool. And I don't love the idea of pulling out a dusty English language arts textbook either, but
Well, and one of our favorite things that we noticed when we first started looking at the program was the 360 units that are already available through the program actually feature some of the novels that we teach at different grade levels already. So we have those novels that we've been teaching, and now there are all of these really great supports and lessons and additional resources to teach those novels. So that was another factor for us.
And we're going to spend some time meeting this summer. We're excited to kind of review our current curriculums as they exist and kind of examine where this fits in and what it could replace or bolster as we go.
So do you see this as a daily resource?
I think so.
I don't know.
A text?
Yeah.
I think the nice thing about the program is there are large pieces and then there are also small pieces that could be used for a few minutes a day or a larger part of our block that we have with the students.
Because I also did not want you to turn from the print medium and are available and the quality of young adult literature. What about some of the other programs that you have going, the whole research segments that you have going that would work simultaneously with this? And what about writing? You seem to be looking a lot at reading. How does this work with some of your writing units?
So it works really well. The way that so there's like several types of units. So there's like Some of them are called multi-genre units, and that's where you'll read stories and poems and informational text and merge it all together. And throughout that, there'll be some kind of defined small writing skills that you're practicing. So it could be transitions between paragraphs. It could be text-based evidence and analysis. So there's those smaller pieces that build. And then every unit ends with some sort of a writing piece that is pretty substantial. It could be literary analysis. It could be research. It could be argument. And then they also, for each grade level, have 2 writing units that you can use as well. And we're already looking at using those to kind of plug in to some of the current ways that we differentiate our writing. So it has a pretty robust writing component as well.
And I like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I like how there is this library of resources that, or texts specifically, with thousands of texts that can support this type of writing. So if we're doing research, we can find those texts that support that writing assignment. And we know that it's a rigorous text. We find the lexile within that, and we're able to make sure that it's relevant for our students. So just having access to that, we're able to quickly find it is really helpful too, rather than, searching for all of these texts to support their learning elsewhere.
And text, define that for me. Becky.
So informational texts, articles, literary pieces like fiction pieces that students would read to maybe write a literary analysis. So if there were like an anthology, for example, if students, we looked at a few of those, like anthology series that were comprehensive, but we felt like weren't quite as flexible. You have this set of texts that never changes, and you're going to be using the same text for the next 6 years.
Right.
And so there's just a little more flexibility with this, especially since there will be updates on the materials continuously over the time period that we'll be using this resource.
In your slides, you talked about authentic and engaging sources. I'm sorry, I don't speak education. Can you define authentic? What do you mean by that?
Topics that are relevant to the students. So since there is a digital component that can be transferred to print, we have the opportunity to find things that are mostly relevant for kids right now. So their interests can change pretty quickly. And so finding those up-to-date texts, informational and literary that connect with their interests, I think is one of the great things about the program.
Yeah, and like I'm thinking about, and I'm mostly like looking at my 7th grade lens because that's what I spent the most time with, but their argument writing unit is centered around this idea of like social media and risky decisions and how all of that plays in together. Or there's another one where it's about, school start times, which is something some 8th graders love to learn more about their thoughts and feelings on, but now they're getting some hard evidence to kind of support that. And then I feel like what has so impressed me is the texts that they're including. I'm thinking mostly right now about short stories and poems represent or are giving us an opportunity for so much more diverse authors, topics, stories, situations than we've had before in some of our older literature books. And I'm excited to know that we're always going to be getting their updates and kind of what the newest thing is.
That was connected to one of my questions. So it looked from what you saw, there was lots of material and content in which digital. There's things you assign that are in there. Does the student have access to go into spaces and read additional things or kind of explore in that digital space via the tool?
Yeah, we've done before where we've sent them to like a kind of like a text set page, and they've had the all connected under some sort of theme or topic. And the option is, pick anything that is interesting to you in this umbrella and then practice, whatever our skill is, whether it's summary, evidence, anything like that.
Piggyback on Jeannie's question about writing. When we talk about writing, is it actual writing or is it primarily typing, or is it kind of a breakdown of opportunities to actually use your hand and as opposed to typing?
Because we can print out any of the resources, we'll probably use a combination of the typing and the handwritten. Like Beth mentioned before, we feel like there's an aspect of a higher level of engagement in many cases when it comes to actually pencil and
Sure.
paper writing it down. So we're going to have a variety. We do want to prepare the students with the 21st century skills of using the digital resources, but we also want to balance that with pencil and paper as well.
In middle school, we're so intent on the writing process and really making sure students master the writing process and develop their own writing process. And I feel like some of those smaller steps at the beginning of the writing process are often kind of pencil and paper. And some students, like I know I kind of prefer that approach to thinking when I'm first starting something. So we try to give students opportunities to try different modalities so that they can kind of figure out what their process is going to be in the future when they don't have that kind of structured class time to explore it.
Thank you.
When you talk about the software as identifying problems and even gives you a child by child, is there then something also in this program that allows you to give the child more work or reorganize where they are or meet them where they are, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I watched the primary program and how it, especially the, what's it called, Lexia, identifies and then creates actual work for the kids to build on those skills that they need. Is that something that's in this?
Yeah, so the assessment portal where I think you saw an example where each section was divided by standard. There are what they call target lessons, actually hundreds of them that are designed to support students in mastering skills in like a small group setting. So that would be kind of a reteaching opportunity if a student isn't mastering a specific skill. And also the texts themselves can be differentiated by grade level or reading level, which is really helpful. If you're trying to have a student master a skill and they read at a specific level, sometimes it's helpful to have access to that text that is accessible to them so that they can master the skill specifically.
And the program runs grades up through grade 12. So we have the opportunity to also stretch our students. And since it's all aligned by standards, if you see they have, like the way it laid out, if you see they have mastery on that standard at your grade level, then you can dig into that standard at the next grade level to find them something to help them kind of with that next step.
Is there a chance you'll, now that we're done with the pandemic, you'll bring back the collaboration with Science Shakespeare people? Shakespeare. We gave it up for the pandemic. Let's bring back. Yeah, we love that. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next we have the high school.
Sure. Join us and walk us through the process that is. Thank you.
I'm Angie Edmonds, with my colleague Allie Wisher, and I appreciate her coming with me this evening. I'm kind of dragged her here. Just a little. I'm sorry, I owe her for something. So between the broad online availability of texts available through the public domain and the use of individual student fee books, the high school English department has chosen to adopt textbooks for only 2 of our courses. We're looking at adopting for the AP language and composition class and the AP literature and composition class. For the language class, we're looking at the AMSCO text, and for the lit class, we're going to look at the Bedford St. Martin's textbook.
So to be honest, our primary goal with both of these texts was to find something that was college level material and that aligned with the College Board curriculum, which in just recent years has become very prescribed. And so we have a lot less freedom in terms of how we teach the standards. There are recursive units in both classes that have very particular skills and standards that need to be covered within each of these units. And in the past, I would say with both classes have brought in a lot of our own text, a lot of our own materials, and we wanted to find texts that really aligned with that College Board curriculum. We also wanted to make sure that we had online access for our students who need that in order to meet their accommodations, and also to have some practical teacher and student resources that are AP test-like, but outside of the AP classroom resource that the College Board provides, which is somewhat limited in the amount of material that it gives us. Both of these resources also align with the Ohio State ELA 11-12 standards. So the AP curriculum, as I said, it starts with big ideas. Both classes have this framework that looks at big ideas, enduring understandings, essential knowledge, learning objectives, and recursive skills and standards. And trying to work in this organization, which is somewhat complicated, with a text that doesn't clearly outline how various passages and activities and scaffolded writing assignments fit into this has been challenging. Yeah. And so now we found two texts that I wouldn't say do it for us, but they will ease that planning process as new teachers step into the roles that Angie and I are currently filling.
So one of the reasons, obviously, we chose these because of the clear organization and the alignment. We also feel that I want the AMSCO book. It's a new book for us. We've never used AMSCO before. And most of the online forums and whatnot that I'm involved in and my teacher friends, this was kind of the new book that everyone has been raving about. And I'm pretty excited about it. The passages are new. AP Lang is very nonfiction based. And so I was looking for new voices, new topics, new themes, instead of the same old tried and true American dream, and things like that. So I really appreciated the way the AMSCO was put together. And this is going to sound silly, but it's also not really a hardback book. So I like to see kids bending a book, and I like to see them being able to stick it in, their back pocket and walk around with it like that. We can't do it. It's very fat, but you know what I mean? Like I don't want them to feel like it is more like the anthology that we had in college, and that was fun, right? I'm trying to make it fun.
And the AP Lit book is actually the third edition. We are currently using the second edition of this book. But like the text that Angie is using, very diverse authors, a wide variety of text from the 1600s right up to, 2018, 2020, 20, I think the most recent text in there is from 2022. It has a nice balance of AP Lit does not cover nonfiction, but this text does include some literary analysis and nonfiction instructive essays. And
the book that the juniors, we do AP Lang junior year, AP Lit senior year. And this book, I do nonfiction, but there is poetry in there as well. Like there's a really nice connection that leads them to the next year, and even though they're not from the same publisher, it's beautiful the way they work together in that way. So we feel pretty confident that these newly revised editions will provide our students with better preparation for the test and the college level writing and all those skills that they talked about, those 21st century skills. We really feel like these books will help us supplement those. We don't look at these texts aren't our everyday, day in and day out, what we do in our rooms. Also important to touch on the differentiation aspect of these. Like we talked about before, there are varied selections and authors. The scaffolding for essay instruction, I think, is really strong in both books. They do a fabulous job at the middle school with the writing process and giving them those basic rules and putting things together. And now we have to kind of break those rules.
now we teach them how to break them.
Yeah, so we break the rules and they. I know. And so
You have to know what it is.
Yeah.
Before you can.
why to break it and how some different ways to break it. And I think the scaffolding is really strong in both of these books. Because our students, we really pushed at the high school to make our AP program accessible to everybody. Anyone can, we want to encourage, even if you are not the strongest English student on the planet, that you should try it, because we have tools that we can help you get to where we need you to be. So there's pre and post reading guides, unit organization options, model text. That's huge in what we do. The model texts are really, really big. And the model writings that are available in those. There are varied lessons to prepare students for the AP style multiple choice and the essay writing, which ultimately is what they're heading toward in May. In addition to those resources for differentiation, in the teacher resources and student launchpad, there is an online component to both of these texts. The publisher also provides links to videos offering differentiated lessons and assessment ideas specifically for these texts. These texts offer multiple options for approaching units and like things like the study thematically, genre, time period, lots of different options in that. And we are more of a novel based, I would say, at the high school. And so we look at our textbooks as a supplement to what we do. And, we think that's how we get the most out of our kids. So that's us. Do you have any questions? I said, don't smile.
Don't defer.
He's not smiling.
Thank you, Scott. I'm happy. The only thing is not really, I mean, it's related, but, I've just been reading about the attention span of kids. Are you finding that you're having to have text, whether they're passages or they're studying? I know you do novel based for most of it, but are they needing to be shorter? Are you challenged by that? It's a little bit off topic of you presenting a textbook, but I'm just worried about that as someone in education and wanting to challenge our students and encourage them. I love that you're making the AP courses accessible in their ways to help support kids. But are we also, I know the answer, but are we also still challenging them and helping their attention span?
In the new, I can only speak to the AP Lit curriculum, but in this new curriculum, there are 9 units. 3 of them are poetry, 3 are short fiction, and 3 are long fiction. And so we really only do 3 long fiction pieces over the course of the year in order to maintain in order to be approved by the College Board audit. And that's something that in the past, we really had a lot of freedom to do what we wanted to with the AP curriculum, and that is no longer the case.
And I would say in the Lang, with the nonfiction, I think that's part of what I love is that we do a lot of short essay type essays that they can access, read in a short amount of time, and come and have like really rich conversations that stem from topics and themes that were coming out of our novels. So I find that it's easy to supplement the shorter selections, but they're not very short. I tell them they're short. They're not very short. They're still a couple pages each time. I would say we're still pushing them pretty hard. And I teach freshmen and I teach juniors, and that attention span gets a little better by the time they come back to me as juniors, which is.
What about summer reading?
Yes. So last year we transitioned to, we called it the big read. We did notice, during the pandemic and everything kind of shut down, that we wanted to have we decided we're going to kind of do a common theme every year and have every child in the building read the same book or type of book. This year we're going to a genre. We just felt like maybe that way we could get other departments involved as well. We chose Finding Chica last year, so our science department could piggyback on the science that the book was talking about. History department could talk about the history of the novel. So this summer, we've chosen graphic novels with all under the theme of identity. And there will be a choice of 6, like 5 or 6, I can't remember off the top of my head, 5 or 6. And we will make those available to all of our teachers, the titles. And we're meeting particularly with the social studies department in May to design some lessons. So like at least the first, we come on Thursday. So that second week, all of our students will be getting similar experiences in all of their different classes where they're talking about the topics in these books. And the graphic novels there's a wide range.
There are, and we've worked hard to try to choose texts that can be read on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So the conversations that we might have with freshmen might not look the same
Right.
as the conversations that we have with seniors. But with all of our students, we can give them at the end of the year, these are books that we think are great. These are some suggestions or things that we would love for you to explore on your own. But I think we've learned the lesson that forcing or trying to force students to read texts that we have chosen over the summer that might be a stretch and a challenge for a segment of our student population does not set students up for success in August and September. And so we're much better to do something like this where, you know, everybody on the football team, the soccer team, the band or whatever is reading the same book and
They can share them, they can pass it around and honestly, other departments kind of piggybacked on what we were doing and started assigning summer stuff. And some of these kids were really bogged down in the summer.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I came here a long time ago, I mean, my honors freshmen were reading 3 books on their own. And I'm thinking, oh my God, why did I do that to them? You know, like that was kind of, it was a lot. And especially now then history started doing something. If you're in art, you're doing things. We want them to also enjoy their time. But this way we hope they have a little bit of choice this summer. That's the plan this summer. So who knows what it'll look like next year. I would imagine we're going to stay with a little bit of choice, but sticking with different genres, trying to expose them.
Talk about how you create a sense of accessibility for kids relative to the curriculum. You mentioned having some freshmen and then juniors. What's the way with kids who aren't necessarily already in the honors English as freshmen, there's some exposure to literature or some aspect of it that gets them excited or has them believe that this is something they want to go
Well, I think I've taught both college prep 9 and honors 9. And we have worked pretty hard to have a good deal of overlap, particularly in the novels that we're doing at both of those. So we do feel like there's a common experience there for them. I don't know. I just think we encourage them like crazy teachers will, when scheduling starts to happen, you will find English teachers approaching kids saying, I really think you should consider this. It's time to challenge yourself. And every year we find more and more kids making that jump. We ask them to write a sample essay for us. We evaluate it. It's not just the one teacher who has them that year who's making the decision. It's sort of a team decision. And students can always say, you know what, I don't agree with you. I'm going in there. And we say, great.
but all of our classes have a mix of, you know, both the honors and the college prep classes of texts that would be considered part of the traditional Western canon, you know, classics, if you will, and texts that are more contemporary. At the younger grades, at freshman and somewhat sophomore level, there's a little bit more of young adult literature.
We've
But
worked
at the
really
junior
hard.
and senior levels, we have texts that are contemporary and at adult reading levels that are still very high interest.
And we've worked very hard over the last few years of making sure that we have real variety there, that kids can really find something that interests them, different authors, time periods, contemporary, not contemporary. Like we have worked really, really hard to make sure our lists are diverse, enriching, and timely. You know, I get to teach The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which is an incredibly cool book, right? Which leads to an iSearch paper. You know, I mean, we've been able to really add some new titles to our works and some more choice for them over the last few years. I think we've done pretty much.
It was for me not knowing all high school too. Like when you talked to me, like we asked for middle school, how much writing is involved in those aspects too. For I know we're talking AP textbook, but just general 9 to 12. Is there a good amount of writing?
Not grading. No, yes, there is. I would say with each unit that we do, there is a writing component and it builds over the course of the year. We work on argument, literary analysis, synthesis, And then then we kind of moved from literary analysis to rhetorical analysis, looking at the craft of a writer and then trying to mimic that craft sometimes. And then you guys are doing.
AP Lit is just straight literary analysis.
Yes.
There isn't discussion of rhetoric, but it's a higher level of critical thinking. I mean, it's the exam out of all of the AP exams, believe it or not, that has the lowest pass rate, not in our district, but nationally.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything that our other classes do builds up to that. And there are students who come into AP Lit and find success because they're really interested in reading who have never been in an honors class 9 through 11. And I think that's a testament to the work that all of our department does at those levels in the college prep classes as well, that a student who has not been in honors can still get a 3 or higher on the AP exam.
And we, like sophomore year, we spent a great deal of time sophomore and senior year on research and synthesis. I think those are the two big hits those 2 years. We do little mini activities when it comes to those for freshman and junior year. And our new media specialist is fantastic with helping with the writing. She comes up with, I mean, she's awesome. Amanda is great. If you've not met Amanda, you need to spend a little time with her because she has just wealth of knowledge.
She conferences with students. Yeah. She is, the greatest compliment I can give her is that she teaches research the way that I want research to be taught, the way that I would do it myself. I feel very comfortable teaming with her and co-teaching, and she's very knowledgeable, and it's just a joy to be able to share that with her.
So I would say at each quarter, you're talking 2 pieces probably that are pretty significant at every level. And now sophomore year, you're obviously working for the what do we call them now? EOCs. They changed every couple of years, but that, you know, it's a lot of, we call them CERC paragraphs.
It's essentially looking at a text, finding evidence, and then building reasoning and commentary in order to explain why you choose that evidence. And students need that skill in all of their classes across the content areas.
And then I know you just mentioned that you landed on AP books. Was that just because I just can't remember where we are in the rules, but honestly, I know.
We just feel like with our college prep classes, there's so much available in the public domain that we didn't want to be tied to just the typical traditional things that tend to be in those textbooks. We wanted more flexibility and ability to bring in outside resources.
And to be honest, next year we're looking at curriculum revisions. And so to choose it, we really should be doing this the other way around. So we didn't want to build our curriculum around some publishers' choices. We want to make sure that we have flexibility so that we can build a curriculum that is right for our district.
And we do change novels, and most of our supplemental material connects to what we're doing in there. So to be tied into something for 6 years just doesn't seem right for all of our courses. And the AP curriculum has been rewritten. So now we are, and like Alex said, it's very prescribed. We don't have a ton of leeway.
It is AP exam season, as I understand.
Yes, it is.
And you had mentioned that at least nationally, the exam scores for AP Lit and Lang are lower than perhaps other.
Only for, well, I don't know about Lang, but I can tell you that AP Lit nationally is the exam that fewer students pass nationally than, I mean, students are always shocked to hear that that's not true for physics or AP Calc. And part of that is because more students nationally take AP Lit than the rest of the exams. But here at Wyoming, our students score very well. I think last year in AP Lit, we had, was it 80? I have to double check. I think it was 86 or 87% of our students scored a 3 or higher. So,
and Lang is the most tested subject across the country. Like it's the most that more people take that than any. So it just goes all over the board every year.
So we're not finding that we're behind, at least comparatively with the other AP.
we are always ahead, well ahead of the curve.
Very good. Okay.
State and nationally.
All right, well, thank you very much. This is a first reading, and therefore we will vote on it as an after 30 days. So if anyone wants to, well, I guess online will be there.
Figure, I'll work with Ashley
Okay. All right, that's good. All right, thank you. We'll go on to the board. Oh, no, sorry. Gifted. The gifted services study, our CAC, our second CAC presentation.
Yep. And so, yeah, this is on gifted services, and Virginia Hodzik is here to, I think, kick it off for the group.
Thank you. Well, I was gonna say my name, but not on the. Good evening. We are the gifted services branch, for lack of a better word, of the CAC. That includes Ross Bartels, Kelly Churchwright, Lauren Fernandez, myself, Ashley Lang, Nathan Lee, Haley Parks, and Toya Wall. Our resource for this study has been Dr. Quattrone. I'm Director of Pupil Services here in Wyoming. Tonight, we have a lovely little presentation for you. We will talk about definitions of a gifted student, by definition in Ohio, different areas of giftedness that students can be considered gifted in, Wyoming stats, some of the common challenges and implications that gifted students typically face, our research findings for what we call SMART practices for specifically gifted students, focusing on emotional and academic in primary, middle, and high school. We'll go over Wyoming's continuum of support and talk about what similar districts to Wyoming do. And then we'll have our additional information in the paper and our recommendations. So there we go. The big topics in our presentation tonight are what are the best practices in providing services to support the academic, social, and emotional needs of gifted students? What options related to content and the scope and sequences of services best support the individual needs of those students? And what do similar districts to us utilize to address these needs as compared to what we do? And then in addition to what we'll be going over in our presentation, you can also find in the paper the methods and the criteria that are used to identify students for gifted services, information on the content, instructional design, and differentiation for gifted populations, and then more information about all of the things that we're going to talk about. Next up, we have Toya.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So we're going to start with definition of gifted students. The state defines it for us as one who performs or shows potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment. That's as compared to other students that are their age, in their environment, or of their experience. And public school districts in Ohio can assess gifted students in 4 different areas of ability: superior cognitive ability, specific academic ability, so that's your math, reading, writing, science, social studies, creative thinking ability, and visual performing arts ability, so that's your music, dance, drama, visual arts. So now we'll take a look at Wyoming specifically. It's a little bit cut off there, but this slide is basically showing the number of gifted students that we have identified in Wyoming and how that compares to the services that the students are able to access. And so there's a cumulative effect here. So if you are identified as a gifted student in primary school, you remain in that category throughout your school career, and you continue to access services. And so you can sort of see that play out in the data here. One of the things you'll note is that Wyoming has a significant number of gifted students. So it's in no way, shape, or form a really small or niche program. It's a significant a part of our student body, and our ratio of services provided to students identified is really high. So almost all of our students that have been identified as gifted receive services. And that's not the case even in some of our peer districts here locally. So I think that's something that we really should be proud of. One of the things I'll note is that you'll see that creative thinking, social studies, the academic and superior cognitive, those are just some of the ways to assess giftedness. So there are other ways to assess giftedness that we aren't utilizing in Wyoming. And then as I'll share on the next slide, there's a number of challenges for Wyoming and virtually every other school district in the nation in terms of identifying gifted students. And that's just noting that you see some of the drop-offs there because we no longer test for social studies, science, and creative. And so where you see there's no red band at the bottom there. That's the explanation. So in terms of challenges, the first is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Historically, and this is the case across the nation, there's just the lack of proportional representation of racially of diverse students within gifted programs. And that's for a variety of reasons. So there are a lot of environmental factors that come into play there that ultimately determine the makeup of gifted programs, but there are also institutional factors. So evaluation tools, identification tools, and supportive structures that have some bias built into it or some cultural incompetency built into it. And so when you combine those things and you think about some of the economic disparities that persist outside of the classroom, alongside not having a lack of robust and equitable evaluative tools and support structures, you can really easily overlook talent. That's related to the next challenge of underachievement. So here we define underachievement as the incongruence between ability and performance. So for gifted students, that could look like they are actually performing at a similar level to their peers, but beneath their own ability. And I think there's been a perception of gifted students as the overly eager, hand up in the classroom, high performance, high grades, high excellent test scores. And that image of a gifted student really distracts from the reality that gifts aren't automatically transformed into exceptional achievements, and not every gifted student is academically motivated. And motivation is one area that's particularly important. We point to a couple of different resources in the appendix or in the list of research. And what a couple of different studies have shown is that it isn't academic intervention that helps underachieving gifted students, but it's more about helping them identify their intrinsic motivations for learning and helping them to find school more meaningful. That really makes the difference. The last one I'll touch on is social emotional difficulties, and we're gonna talk a little more about this on the next slide, but the big point here is that there is a direct correlation between the ability to regulate emotions and the ability to thrive academically, to have social relationships, and to manifest latent gifts and talents. And so for this group of students in particular, they can be particularly prone to social emotional difficulty. So all of the things that are listed there, but a host of other issues. And so this is a pretty critical area of intervention, both inside and outside of the classroom. The good news is that there's been a lot of, in the last decade or so, there's been a lot of experimentation and innovation and new approaches to addressing all of these challenges. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about this now. Turn it over to Shirley.
I know you're not surprised. I'm the one talking about social emotion. So on top of what Toya was discussing with, the anxiety, the depression, and the perfectionism, there's two that people may not know as well. So there's intensity.
So this is gifted students sometimes have this driving passion, or they see the world in a specific way. And they can be in conflict sometimes with their peers or even adults if they don't understand why everyone else is not seeing things their way or are not as passionate about things as they are. Asynchrony is common. So this is where if you have a child who is extremely gifted cognitively, they may not have the social emotional intelligence that is as high as their cognitive ability. So people sometimes mistake that they will be just as mature as they are gifted in their intelligence. And that's not always the case. It doesn't always develop at the same rate. When we looked at our best practices, and we'll explain more on the next slide, the tiered approach was really most effective. So tier 1 interventions for anything social emotional with classroom guidance for tier 1, small group counseling for tier 2, and individual brief short-term counseling for tier 3. During our research, we found specific areas to target for specific grade levels. So for gifted students in particular, grades K1, they talked about really focusing on cooperation, respect, self-image, and responsibility. For grades 2 through 4, that self-regulation piece, self-esteem, and empathy. Grades 5 through 8, it was grit, intrinsic motivation, curiosity, divergent thinking, and self-efficacy. And then grades 9 through 12 was growth from failure, acceptance of ambiguity, goal attainment, and passion. When looking at smart practices for academic, we split this up in primary, middle, and high, and you'll see some go across the band and some are more targeted for a specific level. So for primary, our smart practices or our research pointed to early admittance and accelerated grade to really be beneficial for gifted students. In middle school, acceleration of courses. So that's, at the middle school, our math classes. And at high school, advanced placement, AP classes, honors, and accelerated or CCP. Across all 3 bands, cluster grouping, that is where gifted students are scheduled together so that they're with other gifted students. Professional development for teachers and curriculum compacting, modification, and differentiation. There's a lot more detail in the paper on differentiation and modification. We just didn't have time to put everything in the presentation. For primary, there was a lot of research for pull-out programming in self-contained classrooms. For high school, internships and mentorships, which we will speak to in a couple of slides, and independent studies, and then special enrichment programs across all bands. And that could be summer camps or any other types of opportunities outside of the school. We talked to similar districts in Cincinnati, and then we also talked to some similar districts from the GAC, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But we spoke to Madeira, Indian Hill, Marymount, Princeton, Loveland, and Lakota. What we asked them was, do you participate more in intervention specialists pulling students out of the classroom, or do you do the in-class services only? We also asked them if they engage in advanced courses, if they do any differentiation in class services, and if they cluster group. So what was interesting is it was really an or situation, and it was completely split down the middle. So 3 did pull out, 3 did in-class services, all 6 did advanced courses and cluster grouping. What is great about Wyoming is we're an and situation. So we're not an or. We would appear in both areas because we do the workshop model in the primary, which is an in-class service. And then we also do pull out opportunities at the primary and middle. When I spoke to the members of the GAC, I spoke to North Canton, Lakewood City Schools, Clinton Massey, and Milton Union. And it just showed the same trend that it was really split half and half, and it was an or situation. So half did the pull-out services and half did in-class services. And all 4, again, were advanced courses and cluster grouping. So Ross is going to speak more to internships.
As Haley had mentioned, there's these partnership programs that we popped up through our research, right? So these are just 2 schools in the Atlanta or Georgia area that offer internship programs, basically. So what they do is the last period or 2, they'll set aside an opportunity for the students to go to either a local business, an agency, an organization, and learn actually learn hands-on experience from professionals experienced entrepreneurs, whatever it might be, to build their knowledge on not just book smart, but kind of street smart in a way. So they're able to they do offer it as a grade or a elective. It does enter in their transcript. They are required to hold GPA as well as have a specific number of credits, school credits by a certain period of time. They do offer these internship programs their junior and senior year, and they allow for one per semester, right? So you can have up to 4 potential internships upon graduation. Now, the cool thing is, again, you get that transcript, you get the credit, right? You get the high school credit, but you also get that experience that you could write about when applying for job positions or going to colleges. Like, you get that experience where you don't typically normally would get that opportunity in a school setting. And so, so then we started looking at partnership programs in the local area. And we are lucky enough in Cincinnati to be surrounded by a lot of businesses, right? We have P&G and Kroger in our backyard, Alta Fiber. I mean, all these are in our backyard that we could partner with these programs to offer high school internships or co-ops or whatever it might be. So that's one opportunity for the partnership program. There's also a Jumpstart class programs where it could incorporate, you have your own class within Wyoming that brings in these presentations from these companies in the local area. And it's like a Jumpstart class where they can be, whether it's trying to be entrepreneurs, whether they learn a little specific on what those organizations do, what the professions do, whatever it might be, but it kind of gives them that business perspective. I mentioned the corporate class sponsorship, where maybe there's a project that these businesses have that they want to offer the students, and then the students work as a team to work with in solving these problems at these corporations. Virtual robotics is another thing that popped up in research. Many of you may know what FIRST Robotics is, but I've had experience with it. And basically, it's a program where you can work with a partnership, whether that's, again, any of these businesses. There's plenty of other businesses out there too. These are just a handful that are in the local. But you work with them and you build these models, these robots, and then you enter them into a competition. It's nationwide. A lot of build science, engineering, technology skills. There's also summer camps. We do have the 1819 building of the University of Cincinnati, which is the innovation hub, which is in our backyard, that also could be an opportunity for a partnership program with Wyoming high school districts. So those are kind of that, and I am going to pass this over to.
I think we'll just click for.
Oh, we're clicking to Nate.
You're
Oh,
clicking.
perfect. We're gonna click right there, and you're gonna see Nathan.
So one of our
live.
members couldn't be here, so he recorded his action.
Good evening. This is Nathan Lee, Wyoming class of '99. I'm very sorry I could not join you tonight. I was really looking forward to presenting with the CAC. I've enjoyed working with them, and I hope this is almost as good. I will be sharing some information on Wyoming's continuum of support and how the Wyoming City Schools compares to some of our peer schools in SMART practices. These are the practices we have found in our research and are recommending for consideration. First, let's start with the continuum of support. In our primary schools, we begin with cluster grouping, differentiated learning within the classroom. Our teachers are trained to deliver different lessons that can serve gifted students within the classroom. We also offer pull-out instruction with discovery at the 2nd grade level and reach for 3rd and 4th graders. At the middle school, we continue the cluster grouping and add course acceleration with the advanced math program. Pull-out instruction continues with the cowboy class in 5th and 6th grade. At the high school, offerings are primarily in self-differentiated learning through AP classes and course selection. Wyoming is fortunate to have a large number of AP classes available, offering college-level instruction for high school students. Let's move on to the next slide. This chart is showing us the SMART practices. These are some of the actions and practices that we have found recommended in our research and have chosen to highlight as our own recommendations for consideration. Regarding the workshop model here on the top line, this is in-class differentiated learning. This is the direction that more gifted education is heading. It's more efficient, it requires less faculty and facilities, and it helps offer gifted services to a large number of students. The individual model, which we practice at Wyoming through our pull-out classes in the primary and middle school levels, is becoming less common. But it's the best way that we've found to address the social and emotional needs of our gifted students who may struggle with these challenges more than others. At many schools, the workshop model is starting to replace more of this individualized pull-out instruction. Wyoming offers both through our AND model. We have differentiated learning and we have pull-out services. This is uncommon and we're fortunate to have it here. We have gifted intervention specialists and we have teachers who are able to deliver high quality gifted education because of the professional development that we invest in. Having both of these allows us to deliver our gifted students, allows us to deliver our gifted services to a wider range of students, and we want to make sure that we continue that trend to deliver to a wider, more diverse, and better served range of students. It lets us deliver on anti-racist advocacy and by providing culturally sensitive identification. Having our dedicated and trained staff will allow us to better identify students whose cultural and linguistic backgrounds may make them less likely to be identified as gifted. It will allow us to provide earlier and continued access to gifted curriculum. Our recommended next steps build on the strength of this AND model and of our staff and faculty. With continued investment and the facilities and resources that we need, we can ensure that culturally and linguistically diverse students are all served. We can provide effective involvement between the school, home, and the community, especially with diverse students and families, and we can improve our support for everyone. Thank you very much, and let's move on to the next presenter.
That's cool.
Got it, Susan.
Yeah, we're getting there.
All right. I wanted to just compliment the committee's work prior to our recommendations. This is our slide that just shares all of the diligent and thorough research and diving deeper into some of the topics that were presented tonight. You can see that within the paper, the identification, assessment, service offerings, and evaluation, diving deeper into program descriptions here in Wyoming, information about our similar districts, and then more on equity, differentiation, instructional design, gifted in the performing arts, and internships. So based on everything that you've heard this evening and our committee's work, our recommendations include topics such as assessment and identification, taking a bird's eye view and really examining the practices for including groups traditionally underrepresented in gifted programs, considering the stigma of being labeled or not labeled as gifted in low programs, and how programs are communicated. So really examining those social and emotional impacts. Continuing and expanding upon our service offerings, considering opportunities for creative giftedness and performing arts, partnerships and internships, professional learning opportunities for educators in our general classrooms, and consulting or continuing pull-out programming. And then really touching base with all the stakeholders for evaluation, gathering feedback from students, families, and community, especially pertaining to communication, identification, and services. And with that, our committee would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
like I always jump in there, so let
So,
somebody else go
somebody said you
first.
jump. On the initial assessment, that early primary assessment period, and this may be in the full report as well. Is it true that this is a pure test-based accounting that determines whether you're identified as gifted in the early years of primary school? Is there any way to get into be identified as gifted besides the test?
So in order to be identified as gifted as superior cognitive specific academic, there are tests.
Yeah, but is there any way beyond that that
In
we could
Ohio.
do?
In Ohio, you test to be gifted in those areas.
So for
For the
performing
full-
arts, it's different. So for performing arts, it could be a portfolio of performance based on a rubric, something like that, but the other areas it's a test.
But that's essentially the test.
Yeah, that's essentially the test. It just doesn't look like a.
Yeah.
Sure, but for the primary schools, that performing arts category is not something that would be applied, or was it possible?
If you're identified in performing arts, that would be dance, drama, visual arts, or performing arts. And so your service would follow in such a way
Mhm.
that if you were identified in the area of arts, you would be served in the area of arts. So when we were thinking about that differentiation in the classroom in art or in reading or math, you would test on our math assessment in that 95th percentile. And so in those academic areas, it is a test. And that's what the state requires to be identified in those areas.
And what is the benefit, like from the state's perspective, what is the benefit? Like if we would do something that was different from what the state required, would there be consequences? Are we getting funding that's tied to this kind of singular method of assessment?
We can choose our service model, and that's part of the reason that we're choosing the and service model, because we do believe that casts the widest net. But in order to identify a student and call that student gifted and talented by the state definition, you do need to follow that identifier.
That's like state statute.
Yeah.
We do get
We
funding,
do.
okay.
Part of the full funding
Right,
formula, which,
okay.
as you might imagine, doesn't fund anything close to what we do.
Sure, yeah.
Which is the whole moral of the Ohio school funding formula.
But if we would go to more. But I'm looking at, so for example, in the earlier presentation, Mrs. Edmonds noted that like our AP is open to everyone. We encourage everyone to participate. It's a more inclusive way of kind of participating in gifted experiences. And then as we've seen in recent years, colleges are doing kind of a test optional assessment for many applicants, not all, but seems to be most colleges. And so we seem to be moving towards a more holistic assessment of excellence, of giftedness, things of that nature. It just seems like in the primary levels, we're very much kind of a one-dimensional test-based oriented approach to this. And just wondering if we could go to a more holistic, whole child consideration that would account for other sparks of brilliance that could then create a more inclusive participation, what the consequences, if any, truly would be if it's not that much money that we would lose, or could we move into that realm without
Well,
too
and
much?
that's part of the we have about 50% of our student population identified as gifted. And that's actually why we look at the workshop model to allow for students to be grouped and regrouped. And so by training staff and having our regular education teachers be the ones who are delivering that type of service day in and day out, they are casting the widest net, and there's no rule or law that says you can't be giving that same great instruction to every student. And we talked in that conversation last week about those programs of promise and providing that sort of just really good instruction to every kid.
Sure.
In anticipation of great vocabulary, great pre-teaching, to, have students, rise to the occasion and have potential. Because one of the things the state of Ohio does do is allow for that student to show the potential of, and that's part of the definition of giftedness in Ohio. So it's the ability to show potential and or true tested giftedness. And so we like to think that and model allows us to look for the potential of. And not just by saying the only service we have is if you score and then get to come to the secret, curriculum.
Right. That's how do you measure the potential, or in the assessment of the definition, how's that measured?
They don't measure it.
How's it determined? I guess?
Right. They say that in the idea of the potential of, you would look at ways in which you're trying to kind of prime the pump. And so rather than saying, hey, you can only test once and never be tested again, or once gifted, you have to requalify each time to stay gifted. The state years ago said once gifted, always gifted. So you don't have to requalify to keep your gifted status like you would for an IEP.
But we were talking about in our conversation when they did the presentation last week, just especially to Ms. Spearsman, is that, but in primary, that challenge that you were kind of saying of, there are so many gifted kids and at that age, but there is this parental push here and a lot of other places where the kids even knew it, that other kids were practicing to get into gifted where other kids weren't. And it was just kind of like a thing. And so you're like, how do you level that playing field with some of those kids who are getting kind of helped to get there.
Practice to get into it.
They practice there's different tests that look up to. Quiz their kids.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just a thing that happens.
But it's
second grade.
I know, that's why, once you get gifted, you're always gifted, so you don't want to miss that window, right?
Right, and I'm so happy that we're having this conversation, and I want to ask something or put something out there in the context of this conversation, because I love that you all made actually pretty specific recommendations. It seems like you want to continue the pull out and the workshop, and I'm kind of surprised by that. I given that the trend is moving more towards workshop, I'm actually surprised. So I want to hear a little more and maybe we can have a little more in-depth discussion as to why we value the pullout when so many of our kids are identified as gifted. Because I feel like we might, and I don't want to seem like I'm against it. I've had kids in the program and one who was not. So from a personal level, I'm just thinking about all of our kids and how do we address that, the have and have nots? And you don't want to take away and not address things that clearly gifted children might need. But there's a reason that many schools are moving away from the pullout specifically. So I really would love to hear why you all believe that the and approach is something you really are for.
I'm Ashley Lang. I teach second grade at Elm. And I'll speak a little bit just as a classroom teacher and being self-contained, and what a wonderful, beautiful thing that is to see kids shine in different subject areas and different realms of the classroom. And I feel equipped to differentiate within my classroom, but for students that are identified as gifted, providing a specialist to do that, they're getting double dipped. They're getting targeted intervention specific to them. I can do as much as I can with 20 some students, but I feel like it's really important for them to get that extra push and extension from a specialist that is trained within, that arena. My background and my training and my own personal experiences, like I said, I feel equipped, but, I'm very thankful to have a specific person that they can also get extra time with to enrich them.
The districts too that we spoke with that are transitioning more to the workshop model wasn't necessarily because they found the research was best supporting that. It was really just a lack of funding and a lack of personnel was most of the decision making behind that. There was one district that I spoke to that said that was just the research they were finding. That was the way they wanted to move. But other districts, it was more of a logistical kind of shift.
And what do you do in that district where so many of your kids are identified as gifted, but a small percentage are pull out? Like, I know you're doing the workshop, but you're also sending a message when you talk about social emotional learning. And I'm playing, I want to hear what you say. So I like what you're saying, but when one kid, okay, they're identified in the paperwork and maybe they're getting some workshopping, but they see these 5 kids go off and get the things that they do in the gifted class. That's a message to that child.
And there was some pros and cons, and that's why one of our recommendations was to look at the stigma behind the labeling, because a pro was if you do the pull-out services, they can get really targeted intervention for social emotional needs that are just really kind of plaguing our gifted students and maybe not the general population. But on the other hand, there could be a stigma with the labeling. You know what I mean? So it's kind of this pro and con, that there's some pros to it, there's some cons to it on either side, but it's needing some further digging into to decide what is best.
Yeah, because if you pulled out a student because they just needed additional help, but they weren't gifted, there's no one, do students kind of feel that's unfair? Do you know what I mean? Like if it wasn't gifted and I'm pulling out, it feels different than if you're saying someone is gifted and pulling them out, but it has the same effect, which is that personalized trying to, and I think one of Nathan's points was that the reason for the both and is that we haven't found a model, the workshop model that can address the social emotional pieces like the pullout does. And so don't want to leave that part on the table.
Is there something new being done in pullout with social emotional different from the past?
We teach a new program at the middle school, at least. Lions class is 2 years old, and a lot of what is on there for what's recommended by the grade bands is being addressed in that program. There's different units for each grade, and they're the same. So there's, the personal development and things of that nature in every grade, but it looks different for what topics are being taught. And it's taught by the cowboy bell teachers.
Because I'm an older board member, so my experience with it was a social emotional piece, which I do see as important. So absolutely. You're right. And I don't mean to be challenging, but like I feel like it's a discussion that, we value our gifted programming in Wyoming. I certainly did as a parent, but the competition starts early. In 2nd grade, your kids in the discovery program, you think, boy, they have a lot of anxiety on a test. And if they don't get into the gifted program, then they're not going to, and all their friends, like something about that doesn't feel right in terms of what a great educational system that I feel like we have. And I'm glad you're telling me about Lions Quest and hearing your perspective, Ashley, as a 2nd grade teacher. But maybe and I learned something. I did not know that students were that the way you had to identify them was designated by the state. I actually thought that was sort of a Wyoming thing. But my understanding is it's a test, like you take a test. And there are kids who have test anxiety and they're, so it starts creating. I don't think we've cracked the nut on that. And I don't know that we will here, but I think, I just want to add those thoughts.
As a parent with a handful in the grade school, I think it was a shock to me, honestly, like knowing that people are coaching their students or their children to do well on this test. I understand why they're doing it. It's just, in a way, it's surprising a little bit in my eyes. But then once you're gifted, right? Which is, I'm not a full believer in that, because I think people grow at different levels, and you could be gifted early on and then not as gifted later on because you're not implementing your skill sets or whatever. You think, I'm gifted, so I don't have to work as hard per se. So I see challenges. I feel like the stigma behind gifted is, we're creating that environment a little bit, and or enabling it, you might say, by having the terms. And I mean, from experience, having a student that her best friend was gifted and she isn't considered gifted, but her teacher has identified her as she teaches her like a gifted student. So it's you're battling, you're like kind of fighting that label, you might say. So it's just
like
really
the social,
interesting.
emotional
Yes.
confidence building. You know, I can remember one year we were at a graduation and the person who was the salutatorian, her speech was about, I didn't get into the gifted program. And at this time is when you had to test in again in middle school. And I decided that I was going to show them that I was gifted.
Yeah.
And like, not the motivation we want to give, but her speech was about the motivation she got from for years of not, in the 5th and 6th grade years of not being in that program.
Yeah.
So there's something not like that, but I'm not, I know I sound like I'm advocating against it. I just think that as a community and as a school system, think about in the context of this discussion, is there something better than just the pull out? Not where we not have our teachers. We use the gifted specialist in maybe a different way.
I also think that you can be extremely bright and extremely ambitious about education and not necessarily be gifted. The primary gifted program, it addresses things in that pull-out program like challenge math, where these kids, some of them for the first time, have the opportunity to actually get something wrong and learn how to deal with that. And they don't have that opportunity within their normal classroom.
I have seen it, yes.
So I think some of
And I
those
think
things,
we have to point out that's a new aspect of the pull out that was not previously really a part of it. When I say previously, maybe, I don't know, Tracy, tell me how many years back, but I don't.
I've only been here 5, so I probably can't speak that far back.
It's probably about 10 years. I mean, I believe that the state changing that once you're identified, you're always identified. That
That's
was
been
10 to
around
15 years ago.
Yeah, that's been around since before 2000.
So
Can you go to the definition, the definition slide earlier?
And I wanted to just validate what you're saying. Like, I don't think it sounds challenging at all. I think we all started. I mean, I think that's the question in everyone's mind starting this project is like, how do you what is gifted? Like, where's that fine line? Are we talking about, some rare genius? Are we talking about someone who's like studied really hard and just prepared? I think that just is inherent to this whole thing. And so I don't know. I think it was important for us to kind of start at a place like, this is what the state says, and we weren't necessarily taking on the phenomenon of gifted students. But I think that is something that was in the back of all of our minds, probably, as we, not to speak for everyone, but as you approach that naturally, you're thinking about all of those things. So I just wanted to validate that. And I think the part of our recommendation that focuses on stigma, how we communicate what type of services we provide and how we try to provide equitable services, because that equitable means, right, and meeting someone where they are and providing what they need. If they need extra push because they are advanced as compared to their peers, that's a fair thing. But how we discuss it and how we share it with our students, I feel like that's where a lot of work needs to be done, because when me and my husband talked about it, we had the same conversation of, we don't want to try to over prepare. What would be the benefit if the reality was that Wyoming was going to somehow cheat Samara and not provide her all of what she needed because she didn't get gifted? That would be a problem. But I don't think that's the case. I think that there's still going to be a very robust education provided that meets our expectations. And so that felt good enough to us So whether or not she gets gifted, and that's something we want to communicate to her. So I just wanted to validate that.
I had questions in a couple of categories. So one of them was in the space on definition. So it says there's a test, and that's how we determine who is gifted. It said that the student, I guess, on the test either performs or shows the potential for performing. What is the assessment of the show's potential for performing? Is it like a cutoff for performing and then a number for shows potential for performing? Or what's that part?
No, holistically speaking, the definition is the definition of a gifted student is one who shows potential. So meaning you don't have to retest or requalify to be gifted.
Right.
That change from once gifted, always gifted.
Or if you show potential, you can be assessed or like recommended.
How do you show potential? You talk about the holistic assessment of potential, but you said it's just a test. So in our assessment of the students, they either demonstrate it, but how do we determine that they show potential?
No, what I'm saying is when they flipped that definition, they changed it from you have to requalify to once you've demonstrated that you're not ungifted.
You've shown that potential.
Yeah.
That's what's showing
That was the second question I had, but I wanted to come back in a second. That
Oh,
was a
yeah.
process question for me.
Yes.
But the definition says,
Yeah.
a gifted student is someone who is performing or shows the potential to perform.
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand if the test is the measure for gifted or not, how do you on the test show the potential for performance?
I think that, so the state does not, I had the same question and scoured, so the state doesn't, it kind of just leaves that, they define it that way, and it's not like they provide any additional. And so I mean, I interpreted it as, we were talking in the last meeting about referring students to then be assessed. And I interpreted it that way, that if it was a student that I felt had some potential, maybe I would refer them to be assessed versus.
As a teacher or as a parent or?
Yeah, or a teacher, whoever can recommend versus the assessment shows potential.
But we don't do that, right?
We do.
No, I mean, a teacher, okay, I'm thinking for the full out.
But they recommend for an assessment, so ultimately it's still a test that will determine whether they're in.
Yes,
At
yes.
the end of the day, it's still a test.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. It's like, say you see this child in your classroom, you see maybe not arts creativity, but you see like a creative mind and they're clearly out of the box and intelligent, but they get in front of the test and then maybe their mind wanders or they're anxious. And so they're not a good test taker per se. The teacher doesn't have the ability to then identify them and say, look, you know, this kid, there's something different about this kid that isn't measured well on an IQ test. We don't have a way, and the state doesn't give us a way. Is that what I'm understanding? Like,
The state gives us different parameters in which a list of state approved assessments could be administered. So a student who doesn't speak English could be administered a test in their native language. A student with
but still the test. Is there a way to bypass the test?
No, not for, if it's superior
Like
cognitive.
a teacher could say,
Nope, teacher nomination or teacher checklist or teacher override is actually a line in the rule that says cannot be used.
And if it is, that's when the funding gets pulled. Is that the
There are certain
consequence?
sanctions that could be weighed against the district, so funding could be one of them.
So when it says to determine that they are gifted, it's because they're performing at a remarkably high level of accomplishment.
In
That's
accordance with one of those 4 areas, based on the way in which you identify in one of those 4 areas.
Sure. So then the idea that they're once tested at second grade, that they're always gifted, what's the logic of that? What's that driven
Because
on or based on?
logically speaking, you can't be smarter than you are.
Not be smarter than you are.
But so you can't fake a high on a test.
Well, I'm just wondering if at second grade, your assessment is high relative to their age or the environment or the experience, but at sixth grade, that isn't still the truth.
Well, it's normed based on your age. The test that you take at that grade level at that time is normed based on your age and grade. So your test at age 5 is normed at that. Your test at age 15 is normed at that.
Sure.
For
I think
each
I'm
one
trying
of
to
those
understand. You mentioned there was
experiences.
a point where in middle school you had to retest, and they decided to switch that. They changed it from that retesting to once gifted, always gifted.
Right, for identification.
So I'm trying to understand what's the logic behind that? What drove that change or shift?
Because you can't be high and why would you be, but why would you say you're once gifted and then you're ungifted?
You're never ungifted. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
But does the state, like if we designate someone as gifted and then they begin underperforming at some point, is there any like repercussions for that? I don't, or like, does anything happen if a student that is gifted?
There are no sanctions against the district. I mean, the district in itself should question that.
And I actually feel more concerned because I could think there would be lots of reasons why gifted children might underperform, like in your presentation you talked about. But I'm more concerned about those kids we miss. And I know you said that people could ask to be assessed along the way.
So the state was worried about that too. In the last iteration of the law, there were 2 mandates that were put in. And so you have to blanket test now. That was new. And blanket testing means you have to test all in a grade level. That was the first time that ever happened. It used to be that the districts could choose, and there were many, many districts that never ever tested whole grade levels. They were like, we won't do that. And so they were not doing any sort of trying to catch every kid and look for the potential of every child. Wyoming always looked for the potential in every grade level, every so often of every child, right? So we were not a district that was like, we're not going to look for kids. But they said in primary grade, you have to look for every kid at least 1 grade level. And the intermediate grade, you have to look at least once. So we look in 2nd and 4th grade. So that's what we've chosen to do here.
So I was thinking when you were talking through the discussion, if there was any dimensions of giftedness that are benefited by doing something other than more, or doing something other than faster, relative to AP level or kind of doing it in 8th grade versus 10th grade. So I was really excited you're talking about the internships and things outside the classroom, an example of places where that happens. In the reco, you say, I think it's consider partnerships or internships within our district as a way that certain students would be challenged or expanded. Is that how I interpret that from the team? Is a recommendation for us to do that? Yeah. Okay. That's helpful clarification. And then on the recommendation on examining the practices, what are some of the ways you would suggest we look at the practices, or what was some of the things that got that on the page as far as the recommendations for us examining our practices?
A lot of that is some of that is referring to this assessment. So the state does recommend, I don't know if they recommend or determine. They recommend a list, but then from that recommended list, we must choose from, right?
You're only allowed to use the test on that list. And then we choose from that list the most appropriate for our population.
So a lot of the research is saying, so one way you could diversify, right, is to work on the assessment. We know we have a lot of problems with tests, and to your point, how kids, but given that we don't have a lot of control there, some of the support structures that we offer, our approach overall to providing students with the best experience so that they can show their potential, training for teachers that better identify. There was one research study we looked at that said, like African-American teachers, for example, are more likely to identify an African-American student as gifted than a non-African-American student. So they're training on implicit bias and all of these things that could supplement some of these, but those are some examples.
No, I mean, I think you covered it.
I'm really interested to hear that you all say that
parents are preparing kids for the.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is that a thing, like with the primary kids, like?
As a primary parent, everything I've ever heard is there's literally no way to prepare for that.
Yeah,
test.
that was my.
So other than a
good.
good night sleep and breakfast in the morning. So.
Yeah.
And for the kid that is gifted and does badly, they have an opportunity to retest in a previous school district we were in. And I think most gifted programs consider gifted 98th percentile and above. So I actually think Wyoming's program is extremely generous. But that's just a parent.
If you score 95%.
95th, yeah.
And that's what the state says.
Versus Utah, which is 98%. I think there's 10 other states that are all at 98th percentile.
I don't actually have the data.
Kentucky at 99. So.
Yeah, the school district I was in, Kenton County, it was 99th percentile and above.
I don't have the data on it, but it doesn't surprise me at all that people would be prepared. And it shocks me that you say there's no way you can take a test to prepare for the test.
Right.
Because I'm sure on the internet, if I type in like tests to assess giftedness, there's things you can do for the kid. And if you test it early in the district where people move to because the education is great, and there's this esteem around being smart, and there's this positive stigma associated with being gifted.
Yeah.
And we know that people pay for their kids to go to do ACT testing so that they can get better scores. And the results show it's a 4 to 5 point kind of impact. Why would parents not do what they could do to prepare their kids to become always gifted or assessed
I
as
guess the
always
better
gifted?
question is, if there's a test that prepares you, why aren't there more kids in the primary testing into it?
So the benefit of preparing them and being gifted is so that you can do better on ACT. That's the.
No. I'm just saying, it does, I would believe that it does happen. I'm not saying it happens here. I'm not saying it's happened to 80% of the people, but if it's possible to do that in a space where, in the state where the assessment says, once you're assessed to be gifted, you're always gifted, and that always goes with you. People, parents, I would imagine, like it matters to the parents if their kids are gifted, because that reflects on them in these ways. And so I'm not saying there's anything negative about it. It would just surprise me that some people aren't doing it.
I was just wondering for my own edification, like if anecdotally, like if you're preparing your, and because I have a soon to be kindergarten, you're preparing your child, like what's the incentive? Like why do I want my kid to be? Just the label. Oh,
Point of pride, point of esteem for them. They see themselves as gifted. They believe themselves early that they're the AP kind of student. They're a Wyoming kind of student. They fit here. It matters that they're one of us. I mean, there's lots of.
And I think, some of your recommendations talked about how to communicate this program, and if this is something we believe in as a district, and the pull-out piece of it is important for all the reasons you all have stated, that we do have to spend some time looking at how we are making all the students, not necessarily just being sensitive about their feelings per se, but it does send a message and can work on confidence of children. And I do think we have addressed that in some of the years. I mean, you called it the cowboy class as opposed to something else. And I think some of the changes that have been made with Cowboy Bell to make it a little less of an advertisement, that here are Mr. Allen's kids going this way, and they're all the smart kids. Because I can tell you, my one child that wasn't in it, all the Mr. Allen kids went to a play or of some sort, which left all the kids in the math, all the girls left in math class except for mine. And a kid turned to her and said, "Oh, I thought you were one of the smart ones." This kind of stuff happens. Now, she did fine with that kind of thing. These kind of things happen to all kids. But I do, just over the years, hearing from parents, like I just feel like we have addressed some of the stigma of not being in it and the haves and have-nots. We have addressed that in the middle school. And I just wonder if we can just keep looking at ways that first of all, that we are addressing the number of kids that are identified as gifted, not just those that scored 95% on the IQ test. And it does sound like we are doing that. And Ashley, I do appreciate what you're saying about as a teacher in a contained classroom, there are kids you're not going to be able to meet all of their needs. So I think that's a very important thing to realize.
Well, talk about the gifted professional development, if you would, because that's
You might want to
something
speak to some of the things
is
that we're
very-
teaching. Yeah, I think that would be helpful just to talk about how your, and you can go miles beyond this, but helping people understand the social emotional needs of students who have been identified as gifted, because in a lot of this conversation, in my mind, I'm thinking the perspective that they get by being with kids, students that are unique in that kind of a way, and sharing that experience is probably one of the big things that you can speak to with general ed folks.
So one of the first things that I do when I have a parent meeting or when I'm giving PD to the staff is to discuss the differences between a bright kid and a cognitively gifted kid. Because a child that's really good at math and reading don't necessarily have the same traits as a cognitively gifted child. Those cognitively gifted children have those intensities with the high emotions, the passions that you can't really fake or sometimes channel. So when I get to see my students, I have anywhere from 2 to 14 in a group. They finally have people that kind of understand them, and they have a teacher that kind of understands where they're coming from. And they get to be their little quirky, weird gifted selves. And they get to go beyond what is available to them in the classroom. As far as the PD piece, when the state changed their law 6-7 years ago, they also put in requirements for general educators. And we can't claim gifted services unless we are providing professional development to our gen ed. So several years ago, there was a requirement of 15 contact hours a year with a GIS, gifted intervention specialist. That was 3 years of 15, 4 years of 15 hours. So they've had 60 hours with me or someone else that is a GIS. Since then, it's kind of just refreshers. So we're now at 2 hours every year with me. But what that has the kind of the trickle down effect of that is that now we have this workshop model in the primary in reading and math. And that is where you're really going to catch those kids that maybe didn't test so well, but if they're performing really well in the classroom, Ashley's going to pull that kid to that cluster group. It's not like it's just the identified math kids that are in that higher math group. And in the same vein, if a gifted kid is not performing well, they may not be in that highest math group every single unit. So with all of our robust assessments that we've added in the last couple of years and all of our progress monitoring that we use, those groups within the general classroom, I think have really come a long way. And we're going to continue that work next year, really focusing in on that. So I would say that the kids that come with me, I'm very passionate about this because I've been in many different roles as a GIS, 18 years in different districts and being a coach and being pull out, being pushed in. I will say that absolutely emotionally and socially for these bright students, having a safe place for them to go is very important. Any other questions?
I'm just so happy to be having the discussion because it's an honest discussion, and I, as board members, we need to hear. We can start formulating our own opinions based on our personal experience and what we hear of people we know and people that talk to us. But that's why I'm just so appreciative of the study and to hear from people actually in the trenches and doing the work. And it's just so valuable. So thank you. I really learned a lot.
I'm curious too about student feedback. We talked about gathering feedback from students, families, and community. Student voice. We've capitalized on student voice, and I'd like to continue to keep doing that and talking to students about their experiences
Well, sorry, I'm getting the giggles because now I learned something on our end, CAC. You know how we were so with you all were like, this is your time limit. And then we asked like 40. We also know that we'll have more discussion about it.
Yeah. You can have a feedback on how- you can have feedback
Saying that we're like, and another thing, but I just know that it's something that we will then dive into more, I think is always why we are thankful for the work that you all do and what that looks like for us, big picture, and to get feedback and to just make sure.
Well, actually, the work of the CAC, Tim has directed it to, we want your opinion, we want the report. We are curious about something. We asked, we said, we want to know how other people do gifted. You know, is this pull out a good idea? Is it not? Is it a combination? What are we even doing now? You answered all those questions. So I'm so glad you made the CAC is a meaningful group to the sport. So,
And because there are changes all the time, I think it's nice to have a mark. We've got ourselves up to what is happening today. Because many of us have had children in the schools and we know a different form that isn't actually used anymore. So it's good to.
or
be up
it's
to date on
and it's
the differences.
evolved, and that's nice to know.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if somebody told you you'd be home by 8.
I'm sorry.
I know better. You can find- Yeah, let me.
Very helpful.
Yeah. It really is. It absolutely is, yeah.
To me, when we started doing gifted professional development, yeah, but I mean, there is a lot. And so, I go all the way back to bring out. I go all the way back to having a child when you're gifted and the next year wasn't.
Right.
You know, and that's how I used to do it.
But it's hopefully in a small community, you really have to think about. In a small community where so many kids are, need a challenge, and could, be, I like how you distinguish between. Right? And like super hardworking, or have you said it, and the cognitively gifted, there's some different elements that.
I need to send you my parent night.
I'm gonna
really are,
miss it.
Y'all are welcome anytime.
Oh, you're sweet. No, there's.
All right, we will go on here with the board committee reports. Finance met this evening and we covered a lot of ground, so can I turn it over to you?
That'd be great. We did meet earlier today. Remember, finance committee, the superintendent, treasurer, 2 board members, here it's Kara and Dee Dee, and then 2 members of WEA, it's Todd Seiler and Beth Smith. And we, as always, we reviewed our salary and benefit analytic with no variances. We did look at a recently released auditor of state bulletin. I get lots of bulletins from the auditor of state, are normally very technical and all those code things and high book things and depreciation schedules and that kind of stuff. This one was about compliance with college credit plus requirements. And the compliance bulletins they don't issue those very often. And so, we just talked a little bit about college credit plus, when we heard the weighted grades presentation from CAC last meeting. So just wanted to kind of highlight with the finance committee what that meant and its implications. So we'll be working through that. We talked a little bit about the rates that are on the recommendation under my recommendation to approve the amounts and rates and our bond rates. Talked a little bit about that. I had shared that with the board in the update. We reviewed the full year real estate collection. And again, we have sort of been tracking that against from when we passed our last levy in 2017 and just watching, making sure that those collection years, making sure we understand what's causing the little fluctuations in those. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about the 2 outsourcing contracts that are on the agenda tonight, both transportation with Peterman and Scarlett and Gray. and how those impact our budget. And then just a real quick legislative update. The Ohio legislature has been on spring break for the past 2 weeks. They are back in session today. So we just sort of reviewed the schedule, monitoring the biennial budget, monitoring House Bill 1, and then both of the voucher bills, one in the House and one in the Senate. So we did. Great meeting.
Unfortunately, they didn't go to Florida. Instead, they worked on amendments.
They did.
Which may come back to haunt us.
Yes, they did.
Well, thank you. We'll talk about those contracts a little bit with them too. The Citizens Advisory Committee, we have had their report. So
I'm gonna just say real fast, for that, May 9th, that was our last meeting where we'll do, what we did last year, like a little celebration with everyone. We're last year too, we asked for feedback from CAC, just like, they felt worked well, how we can continue. But it was a nice team building thing. Yeah, future studies, so that'll be next month. And they secured, for hours, so that'll be a good little. But yeah, good job. We'll be good. I celebrate.
Are we invited or?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes, of course. Well, I mean.
Well, you know, if it's like more than 2 people.
Yeah,
would it be a meeting or
things we.
Not if they're gonna talk about.
So I guess think about that. You let us.
All right.
But I can go. They changed the strings. And so that's coming up and we'll, I guess.
Okay. We did, I can't remember, there were 3 of us left, maybe there were only 2 of us left. There were only 2 of us last year, so that's
We
why.
overlapped differently, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so maybe someone should think that through, we can all.
Yeah, if we're reflecting on the studies and thinking about future studies, perhaps then no, we would not.
Right, yeah, so we'll go with the 2. See, so you can go if for some reason you can't, let us know. Okay, Superintendent Committee Liaison Reports, the Belonging Committee.
We had a Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative meeting on April 4th, and during that conversation, our committee members just reflected on practices of creating belonging in classrooms. And so it was great because these individuals are representatives from their schools, and so they shared strategies, and we created a document just to take back to buildings, just to share what's happening at all of our building levels as a way to just continue to impact others and share great ideas. That was good. Good conversation.
Thank you. Community engagement. Plenty is still happening.
I know.
High school play
Right.
just passed, and the middle school has one coming up.
We have lots of opportunities coming up tomorrow. It's going to be warmer, which is great. And we have a community cookout over out in front of Pendry, and so that is at 6 p.m. And that will be followed by the R Factor parent session at 7 o'clock. That will be inside Pendry. And so we're hoping we get lots of people there to enjoy a nice cookout, and then to hear lots about what we're doing in terms of building climate in our schools.
Is it the handout?
This is yeah.
That's connected to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we'll be talking about with the R Factor is the culture blueprint and the way that the staff has lived this year, and our idea that we're rolling it out to students next year, and this gives parents an opportunity to hear all that information, to hear what it is.
You go to RCB. What?
We asked so that we could get a general idea of how many people were going to be coming, but we've told people on our PAC meetings that no, that should not be a barrier. If they're able to come, they should come.
It might be nice to say it here too. An RSVP is never meant to be a hurdle. It is just used for planning purposes. And if for some reason somebody finds an opportunity that day, like come to whatever it is, we will split the hot dogs in half.
Well, I got on Facebook, not just as somebody looking at other people's things, but as made a post. I think it's my first time I've been on Facebook in a year where I posted something. Just to spread awareness.
Good.
April 18th of that.
Great.
Probably at least 11 people.
And I sent it out to empty nesters.
Yes.
You go.
So on the 19th, the very next day, we do have principal search, our Wyoming Middle School principal search focus groups happening. So We've got an early opportunity at 7 a.m. that will be in the Bob Year Out PD room at the middle school. And then at 7 p.m. that's for community parents and community members. 7 a.m., 7 p.m., same location. We are meeting with staff after school, 3:15, and I'm organizing a student focus group also, which will be either later this week or early next week for all of our randomly selecting 5th and 6th grade group, 7th and 8th grade group for the middle school.
So the parents are invited to the principal discussion. Are you focusing that on middle school parents or high school?
It's really open wide to the entire community.
Okay. Did an email go to them or? Go to
Yeah, we
parents?
got one to Wyoming all.
Mhm. Yes.
And it went to all families, and it went to Golden Cowboy Club. And then we will also put it out again through social media channels. So but it has blanketed. Yeah.
Well, and then the other community kind of ties into facilities, but I think it's also community kind of falls under the community engagement of all the facilities.
Right.
Coming up that we can talk more about.
And do we get, we're set,
And
right?
but I do think, yeah, it just is the season, right, of all the concerts and one of the fall.
Yeah,
Exactly. This is city related, but in supporting their thing too with the school. It's upcycle day on Friday, which I think is really cool thing that the city has started and encouraging people to do that. Since we're really looking at environmental friendly, like you can bring stuff down, and then they have so many different community volunteers there. So I think it's a cool community day for people to participate.
Correct.
The Wheelathon. Yes.
Wheel-
That is on April 23rd from 1 to 4. So PSA's Wheelathon is back and good.
Okay.
I'm sure there's some good.
I guess planning and goal setting, we talked about last time, policy review is coming up, so we're down to student achievement.
Yes, and we did have it seems like so long ago, March before spring break, March 23rd, we did have a district leadership team meeting. And really during that conversation, we focused on our 2023, 2024 district goals.
Okay, which is what?
And we solidified those goals, and so now buildings are using those district goals to fuel their conversations on building goals and academic building. So that's the work between now and the end of the school year. And we're really excited about the alignment amongst our buildings, but then also the alignment with our strategic plan as those goals get developed. It's powerful.
Right. Board of Education report, we have a first reading of a policy, 7540.02, web accessibility. Is there anything anybody would like to ask about that? I think Tim explained it well in that it was not something we could deal with when we met as a policy group until the tech people had taken a look at it. And
as I've shared, it's really about how we guide and manage the district and student websites that are created through coursework often with kiddos. Yes.
And there's some new verbiage on accessibility.
Yes.
For all.
That's
Yes.
it seems like that was a big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
That was most of that.
A number of paragraphs. All right, so that, because it's a first read, we'll sit for 30 days and then we'll vote on it next time. B, approving all the policies that we went over last time. Does anyone have any further discussion or questions? All right. And then the next item is to approve the primary textbook adoption, which Gina presented to us, Dr. Bush presented to us last month. So it has been a number of days with those. Once we heard tonight were first reads, so we'll have to act on them in a month or so. If there are no comments, then may I have a motion to approve the Board of Education report?
So moved.
And a second? Second. And roll call.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Treasurers.
Thanks, Jeannie. Item A, approval of the minutes from the meetings on March 20th and April 4th. Item B, approve the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending March 31st. Item C, accept with appreciation the donation from the Wyoming School Foundation. Item D, appropriation adjustments for the month of April. And item E, accept the amounts and rates as determined by the budget commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. And F, approval of the report, please.
All right, I have a motion. So moved. And a second.
Second.
And the roll call.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mrs. G.
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller.
Yes.
Mrs. Barger. Yes. Mr. Feldmeyer.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of personnel items. First that I'll share and it's for your approval for. Number one, approval for resignation that we have received. Number two, approval for or the appointment of an interim administrator, and this is Kathy Ryan, who we're excited to invite into the middle school today. And in Kathy's background, she's taught in the district as a special educator. She has been at the high school, the middle school, in teaching roles, I believe, counselor at the high school, assistant principal at the high school, and was principal from 2008 to 2003 to 2008 here at our middle school. And I know she is very excited about supporting our students and our staff as we finish the year. So exciting for Kathy. Number three, new personnel. We have Linda Adams, who's being recommended as a middle school media specialist. She filled in this past year as a long-term sub within that role. Has done a fabulous job. And then secondly, Chloe Cooper-Ryder, who has been teaching primary, but this would be more solidifying her role as a first grade teacher, and that would be at Hilltop. So we're excited about both those individuals. Number four is a recommendation to approve the renewal of administrative contracts. And you can see there are 4 contracts that we are recommending a renewal for. And we appreciate their support of students, staff, and our families and the great work that they do. Number 5 is a recommendation to approve the renewal of certified limited contracts. Again, these individuals do incredible work to support our students all day, every day. So to say thank you to them is critical. Number 6, this is a recommendation to approve 3 continuing contracts. One for Elizabeth Denneman, one for our own Jen Gerstner, who's here with us today, and one for CJ Langenhoff. And I don't know if you want me to come back to these. I did want to share some fun information. You want me to share that now or come back? Yeah. Okay, so let's start right now. Okay, so this is feedback that has come from individuals just on the impact that these individuals make, and really the excitement around the continuing contract status that we're recommending. So I'll start with Jen Gersten, because you're here with us. So I'm just going to read some of these highlights that have come from other individuals. Outstanding teacher, provides engaging, rigorous, high quality learning experiences for her students, exemplifies what it means to teach the whole child, engages with parents regularly, works closely with the principal to ensure growth of our gifted learners, provides professional development to classroom teachers and on a regular basis. And that's through benchmark meetings, through staff meetings, through other professional development opportunities, plans professional development with the principal, data-driven teacher, consummate professional, one-on-one conversations with staff in order to advocate for her students, embraces leadership opportunities, primary building leadership team member, primary master scheduling committee member, leads in in-view testing, asset to our entire Wyoming primary team. And then to highlight our high school art teacher, CJ Langenhoff, team player, served as the art department chair, thoughtful conferences with students, great rapport with his students, passionate about his content area. His creativity is one of his greatest gifts, always creating new projects for students. As a worker, he's punctual, dedicated, and reliable. Maximum effort every day. Values teaching and learning, culture and belonging, and communication, and knows that art serves a valued spot in the social emotional needs of our students. Great asset to our Wyoming culture. Congratulations, CJ. And Elizabeth Denneman, primary counselor, instrumental in shaping our support of the whole child at Wyoming primary schools. Developed and implemented a comprehensive tier 1 to meet all primary students' social and emotional wellness needs. Provides consultation, coaching, and support to classroom teachers. Provided staff professional development. Exhibits the utmost professionalism. Very involved in the primary and has facilitated the MTSS process for SCL. She has helped improve and grow Wyoming primary schools. Congratulations, Elizabeth. Great, that's awesome. And so again, we have so many great things happening in the district. It is really nice to just take a moment to celebrate those great things that are happening. Yep. Okay, so number 7, continuing with great things and people who really make a difference. This is a recommendation to renew educational aides, library aides, clinic aides, health specialists, and our parent resource liaison or mentor. Again, these roles are critical in the overall school process. Number 8 is recommendation to approve 2 workday calendar changes that you see on the agenda. Number 9 is a recommendation to approve an unpaid leave request. Number 10 also is a recommendation to approve an unpaid leave request. And number 11 is a recommendation to approve staff members, children who are attending Wyoming City Schools for the 23-24 upcoming school year. Number 12 is a recommendation to approve our newest active Raptor volunteers, which represents just an incredible body of individuals who support students and our educational staff all the time. Number 13, recommendation to approve these athletic supplemental contract changes. And what's happening is one supplemental is being used across 3 individuals to support students. Number 14, recommendation to approve ELA plus curriculum work. And these are middle school staff members who are working on curriculum changes that come with a schedule change. So we're revamping the middle school schedule a little bit, and then changes some of the ways in which ELA works. And so they're creating those changes to make sure that they work best for students. Number 15, recommendation to approve MTSS primary committee members, and it's for their work to improve upon the MTSS model. Number 16 is a recommendation to approve primary committee members who are working on their PBIS, positive behavior and intervention support model at the primary level. And number 17, number 17, right? Okay. Number 17 is a recommendation to approve resident educator realignment. And this is because there's been a state change to move from a 4-year program to a 2-year program. So that's the work to realign our model to support new teachers. Okay, so shifting over, item B is a recommendation to approve classified salary schedules at 3% for the 23-24, 24-25, 25-26 school years, and this matches up with certified staff. Items C, D, and E are recommendations to approve this school fee list for each building level. And items E, F, and G, F, G, and H are recommendations to approve the new handbooks. This is the draft handbooks for the 23-24 school year.
Thank you for offering the summers.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And for getting them early.
Yeah, and they're getting,
And
and
giving us plenty of time to read.
and they're getting small, the changes are getting smaller and smaller, but it does help to see the summary of those changes. Item I is a recommendation to approve the contract with Hamilton County Educational Service Center, and those are for all the services that we receive through the county.
That also seems to be getting smaller. It is smaller. Appreciate it.
Yep. And item J is a recommendation to approve 2 new job descriptions. And we're really looking for support within supporting our staff at developing a 504 process and continuing to support our staff in understanding the best practices on MTSS models. And so those 2 job descriptions will help in finding individuals who can support within both of those realms.
But this could be one full-time equivalent, or it could be
separated into 2 different individuals. Yep. Okay. Item K is recommendation to approve the extension of the Peterman Transportation Agreement. Rhonda spoke to that a little bit in her update.
5 years.
Yep.
Right.
And item L is a recommendation to approve the Scarlet Gray Cleaning Services contract. And you can see that as a 3-year agreement.
And I think we thank you very much for getting both those agreements under your wraps and doing a fine job in negotiating a fair and good and efficient system. And a 5-year contract on the buses is great.
Oh, I have.
Okay, it's nice to see that. By the way,
Is
just
that
with
all?
that. Well, I feel like it's funny. But just back to the handbooks real quick, now that I have a question, just a comment of being a part of it over the years of really like they weren't as aligned and just a lot of questions on how we did it with language, really how hard everybody's worked over the past few years to get those more cohesive, I guess, over the different grade bands and having them read similarly and.
And I think the work will continue and really even those go back to and should go back to a strategic plan that aligns our district. Right. So we'll continue to be better and better at aligning those tools with the vision of our district.
Thank you. And may I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report? Second. And roll call.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Aller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick? Mr. Ballmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Right, superintendent's report.
Okay, I do have one more recommendation to approve the renewal of a certified limited contract. And that is it on this.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Roll call.
Mrs. Aller?
I abstain.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Ballmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent's update.
Just, it's a busy time of year. It's an exciting time of year. 6 weeks to go. And filled with all kinds of wonderful emotion. And I know it's a busy time and we're asking for a lot. We're asking for a ton of engagement from folks. But really just a reminder that that engagement matters to us and it's really important to receive feedback. So that's why we're hoping that people are able to find a time, if at all possible, to come to that community cookout tomorrow. Go see what building a culture through our culture blueprint and talking about R Factor is all about right after that. Join us through our primary facility conversations, lots to be involved in. And we're hoping that those are well attended.
Anything else? It's only 9:15. Anyone else?
No, I keep on
we're like,
the
no.
meeting and there's discussion. It just have to say, one thing that we talked about in our finance committee meeting, I don't know if you all know, and correct me if I say this wrong, Rhonda, we have 5 bus drivers. There's very little turnover. They are so good to our students and, we're really lucky that they want to continue because they're like part of the family. And I just didn't think about that we only have 5 and that they don't leave very often. We had one leave this year and it was an adjustment, but so it's great that we have, our contract with Peterman established because we have a really good group of people supporting our kids. What else can I say? No, I'm just kidding. I had a lot of caffeine today.
I just wonder if there's a way to recognize. In person.
They, and Scarlet Gray's no different. They connect with our staff. They connect with our students. They are part of the team. And they get excited about the accomplishments that happen. And that's just what you want.
The drivers are super humble little group. They would shy away from any formal recommendation. We have actually tried to do that. And they were horrified. So it would have to be, we just need to brainstorm some ways that they would appreciate being recognized.
In the morning.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. We have had them in for donuts.
Yeah. You might even see them at some of our events that they take our students to because they go in and watch.
Oh, yeah.
They cheer our kids on.
Absolutely.
And they're wearing their Wyoming blue. They absolutely do.
Good to have them on board. Yeah. All right, well, I guess a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
And I will. I'll second it.
We all in on this.
I think we're ready to vote.
Mrs. Roderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynch?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.